Since the dawn of the GAA in 1884, the telling of its stories have been just as important as the sports. Through the years, heroes and matches have been immortalised, inspiring generation after generation. But some of its most important stories have also gotten lost or turned into legend. And in this series, we will explore some of the GAA's most fascinating forgotten tales, separating rumour from reality and myth from the truth that is often more amazing than the fiction. I'm Michael Foley.
And I'm Ciaran O'Hara.
So join us for Over the Bar, exploring the histories of the GAA.
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
Welcome back to Over the Bar, the Gaelic Games history podcast. We're always grateful when you join us. Just a quick reminder at the top. Do remember to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. It means a lot, makes a difference. It gets word out to more people. Mick,
Yes.
How are you today?
I'm very good. I'm clambering up out of a kind of a sky blue coloured wormhole that I happily fell down looking into today's topic.
So you're tangled up in blue, to quote Dylan.
I am tangled up in blue. I'm tangled up in all sorts of stuff. Because this is one of those ones, it starts at one question, but then it raises another question, which raises a whole lot of other questions. So, I'm putting it to you now to kind of narrow this down to our starter question for 10.
Oh, right. Now, this is tricky because I'm going to put the question, but give me a second here, okay?
Okay.
Because this could be challenged on the definition of what a manager is and when management commenced.
Oh, this is
and
very
all these
GAA.
types of things. But let's say from the late 60s, early 70s on, we're in a time when management is formalised in inter-county Gaelic games.
Yes.
And therefore, what I'm going to ask you is, who was the first player-manager to win an All-Ireland?
So, the short answer is a very glamorous answer, actually. It's a fantastic answer. It is Tony Hanaho of Dublin in 1977 with the Super Dubs. I mean, does it get any more exciting and glamorous and fascinating and dramatic and groundbreaking than that?
No, potentially, one of the great All-Ireland victories.
But
One of the great matches.
Yeah, well, we had the greatest All-Ireland semi-final of all time, arguably the greatest match of all time. You're right. Is it the greatest All-Ireland ever won? From a managerial point of view, you'd have to argue that right. If it isn't the greatest managerial achievement in terms of winning an All-Ireland, it's right up there. It's absolutely in the conversation, and for all sorts of reasons. It's also the All-Ireland that great Dublin team of the 70s cherished the most. Some of them, anyway, would cherish this one the most for reasons that we'll get into. But you're right.
Let's get into it then.
But you're right. There is it's very GAA. There's definitions here and there's nuance and there's grey areas. It's not a cut and dried thing. When you say player manager, I mean, Ciaran, of all people, I'm sure the name Sean Flanagan is ringing in your ears right now. The architect, the captain and the architect, really, of the culture, at the very least, that delivered Mayo their last All-Irelands in 1950 and 51, who pulled together the intelligence and the drive and the imagination of that group of players to push a county board and an entire operation to work in a more, let's call it professional in inverted commas way to deliver an All-Ireland. He could easily, couldn't he? He could have been called a player manager to some degree.
He wasn't formally a part of the management. They did have coaches, good, very, very good, capable coaches. But I think, yeah, you're right, he was the captain. To kind of take us down an Aussie rules diversion, they always have this thing of captain coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could describe him very definitely as a captain coach and a part of the management. And I'm sure there are other instances that we're less aware of prior to that, where a player, a totemic player, has an outsized influence on a team in the absence of a formal management structure.
Yeah.
So I think you can make a case for Sean Flanagan, and I'm sure there can be cases made for numerous Kerry players.
They probably can. Well, they possibly can. I mean, you always had Dr. Eamon O'Sullivan, and you had other people. Jackie Lyne, a great player of the past, came in and was a coach. So you have all of these things. But Tony Hanaho is absolutely in the lineage of Sean Flanagan. In 77, he was captain, centre forward, and manager to win an All-Ireland. And as you said, there are genuine, legitimate previous player managers to Tony Hanaho, particularly and primarily in the 70s. Like Brian McAniff, for example, when Donegal won their first Ulster title, Brian McAniff was player manager. Why was he player manager? Because no one else would do the job. He said it himself. He actually managed the Donegal minors that year as well. Barnes Murphy of Sligo, the year they won their Connacht title in 1975, he was organising trainings already, as you just said there, in a kind of an Aussie rules way, organising trainings, gathering the players together, making sure they're all operating as one. He just got given the managerial job because he was kind of doing all the managery stuff anyway. He was actually in touch with Kevin Heffernan, the Dublin manager, of course, who steps aside, who Hanaho steps in for. He was in touch with Hefo 4 or 5 times that season. He actually had Brian McAniff on his management team in 75. You've others. Val Daly was the player manager with Galway.
I remember that, 1997.
Yeah, for a year. Larry Tompkins had a brief spell as player manager when he came back in 98. And I'm sure there are others. And I hope for any of our listeners out there, if you can think of any more, fire them in. We'd love to hear them. But today, as you say, Ciaran, this is about the winning of the 1977 All-Ireland by Tony Hanaho, how he coped, how he did it, but also in the style of any question about the Dubs of the 70s. It becomes, at first, perhaps a question about Tony Hanaho and the Dubs, but it very quickly becomes a question about Kevin Heffernan.
Which was where I was going to start.
Yeah.
Because I think, and there may even have been a VHS released at some stage of Heffo's Army for the decade of the Dubs type thing. The assumption is, in the way that Dwyer was the constant in the Kerry golden era, the assumption is that Heffo was the constant in the decade of the Dubs, but that's not actually the case. So tell me the story of how Heffo takes the Dubs from nowhere to an All-Ireland, because that's exactly what he did. And then tell me, subsequently, how did he step aside and find himself replaced at the peak point of this success by his captain?
So to put it in, by the way, before we go any further as well, Ciaran, we should say that, yes, you've just asked an excellent question there. How did the Dubs win the 74 All-Ireland, right? There are so many other shows we could do on this Dublin team. And we will definitely be coming back to a proper deep dive into what made the Dubs of the 70s arguably the single most important GAA team of all time, and why Heffo is arguably the single most. He mightn't have been the greatest manager, he wasn't the most successful manager, but he may well be the most influential GAA manager of all time. So we'll be coming back. People are wondering, we'll come back to those. We'll come back to those things. But to put it very briefly, how he went from there to here. By 1973, the Dublin football team were completely flatlining. As you said, the myth is basic. Essentially, the myth is that Heffo comes in with Lorcan Redmond and Donald Colfer as selectors, pulls the Dubs up from their bootstraps, and then proceeds to win a pile of All-Irelands in the 70s, gets engaged in a rivalry with Kerry that reinvents Gaelic football, the GAA, and arguably Irish sport, and continues on then uninterrupted until the mid-80s when he summarily resigns to take over the Irish International Compromise Rules team in 1986. That's the basic skeleton, right? As you say, it doesn't actually work out entirely that way. But the first thing to say about 1974, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening now will be acquainted with the Dubs story and will be aware of this, but just it's worth pointing out for anybody. Like, the Dubs winning the All-Ireland in 1974, it was so unlikely and so stunning to the Dubs themselves, never mind the rest of the country. Like, in 1973, they were flatlining. They come out in 74, Heffernan comes in, gets them incredibly fit, brings back players like Jimmy Keaveney, like Tony Hanaho. Tony Hanaho, who first played for Dublin back in the mid-60s, 1964, left the county scene for 5 years, came back in 1970, and was dropped in 1973. Right? And we'll talk in a second about how important a player he was. But he was dropped. So he comes back in 74 with Keaveney. There's a different energy about them. But even at that, I mean, imagine this. You go into the Leinster Championship. They beat Wexford, but then they beat Louth in the next round. And that is considered a major milestone. It's not just a routine victory over Louth. This is the game where they realize, geez, we might have a team that could maybe do something more.
Maybe win a Leinster.
Well, maybe get to a Leinster final, you know? So, but they get to the final, they beat Meath, who have, it's not long since Meath have been in All-Ireland finals in this era, and it's a massive shock. And they go on, and they win an All-Ireland against Galway. Paddy Cullen saves a penalty. The hill is full of blue flags. There's guys in crepe paper hats coming down. Suddenly it's hail, hail the Super Dubs. And it's everything is on in a way that the Dubs have maybe never known it. And as I say, the GA have never seen something like this. The glamour, this team, they're handsome, I wouldn't say they're young. They're, a lot of these guys have had a lot, like Hanaho, they have a lot of time behind them.
They're kind of trendy.
They're really trendy. They're they are of their time. Long hair, fantastic sideburns, well-dressed, very interesting people. A lot of them in hugely high power, or moving into high-powered jobs. All of them, really interesting people outside of football. So, like, it's an amazing group of people. And then you have Kevin Heffernan, this singular figure who will be on teams of the century. He's already an outstanding all-time footballer, now moved into management, and he's just this force of nature who has decided almost singularly, as I say, that this is not acceptable for Dublin football to have fallen this low. And within 12 months, he wins an All-Ireland. They go into 75, they meet the great Kerry team that's just coming up, this young Kerry team, not expected to do anything, and Kerry beat them. Okay? Massive shock, right? As much as Dublin winning was a shock, Kerry winning was a surprise. And suddenly we have this strange scenario where you have these two teams and they're kind of looking at each other going, wow, there's something happening here, right? On top of that, keep in mind that one of Kevin Heffernan's great obsessions in life is keeping Kerry down. He was in the 1955 All-Ireland football final, the landmark Culchies against the City Boys final, where Heffernan played corner forward and was brought out the field in this revolutionary tactical move that Kerry managed to cope with and won the game. So a lot of his football being is based on keeping Kerry down or beating Kerry. So he comes back, 76, Dublin win the All-Ireland final against Kerry, and now we have a rivalry and we have a movement in Dublin. They have now won 2 All-Ireland titles in 3 years. This is, again, unprecedented for a long, long time.
Yep, the hill is heaving.
The hill is heaving. The city is heaving. Like, we have colour TV, Ciaran. There are things, and it is just so exciting. And the buzz around football. Now, as people know, Dublin and Kerry in that decade just pull away from everybody. And they create a rivalry that's for the ages. But as a spectacle and as something that people look forward to, Dublin and Kerry is massive. So by the end of 1976, Heffo has, like Alexander the Great, all lands have been conquered. Dublin have won 2 All-Irelands in 3 years. Kerry have been downed, okay? The game itself, the city, has embraced Gaelic football again. What more is there for him to do? What happens next?
Well, we covered this to some degree in our episode on the Wembley tournaments, and our Cardiff
Weirdly,
members will be familiar
knew?
with this. So, Hefo steps away while the National League is still in progress, because this is back in the days when the National League starts straight after the All-Ireland.
And again, this is a story that has been told many times. For people who are interested in this topic, there are a world of documentaries and books and newspaper articles, and large tracts of them are devoted to the question, why did Hefo step away in 1976? Even though, as you say, Karen, it's kind of glossed over in history also at the same time. It's just assumed that he was always there in some way, shape or form.
Love the free episodes of Over the Bar? Then take your passion further with the Cordia Club membership. For €5 a month, you'll unlock bonus series and member-only shows, hear the podcast first and ad-free, and get behind-the-scenes access through detailed notes, a newsletter, and Q&As. It's the ultimate GEA history experience, curated by Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara just for you. Upgrade your listening, support the show. Join today at overthebar.club.
I could hazard a guess, I have to say, given, and you've only kind of given an abbreviated biography of him, but like, Hefo is around since the early 50s. He's been involved throughout the 60s, during the period when there were selection committees in Dublin. So he's a member of those selection committees. He's much more a coach on the ones he's involved in. But he's never had autonomy until he comes in 73. And that's one of the critical factors. He's given full autonomy by Jimmy Gray, the county chairman at the time.
Yeah.
But he invests so much in those years of 74, 75, 76. I'd have to say he's burned out.
And that, I think, looking back now at the evidence and looking back at all of the interviews and everything else that have been done over the years with the players, with Heffernan himself, that looks like the most obvious answer. There have been numerous attempts at conspiracy theories. Was he ill? Was there something wrong? Was there a split in the team? What happened? Who did he fall out with? Why did he just walk away at this peak? And I think it's part of the reason is that they were at a peak. He felt he could walk away because they were in that good enough shape. But what was interesting to me, Ciaran, is when you go back and look at the contemporary conversations that are going on, the idea of Heffernan walking away as manager is not a huge shock. Even in the run-up to the All-Ireland final, and very shortly in the week after the All-Ireland football final of 1976, there is conversations in the media about Heffernan stepping away. Now, it doesn't read like speculation. It sounds like someone has said something, and it kind of makes sense. It's kind of like it's in the wind.
It's the end of a 3-year term, though, isn't it? So
yes,
he's naturally going to be contemplative of it.
Yes.
It has exacted huge, like, to give an example, he asked Jimmy Keaveney when he brought him back to alter his diet, to alter his social habits, and to make himself supremely fit. And he dedicated himself on an individual basis to making this happen. So that's just one player. Imagine that multiplied by 30, the energy that's involved. And imagine that you are engaged by the ESB as the industrial relations lead in one of the largest semi-state bodies in the country. And I think it's a fair assumption to make that he is tired. I also think if a team now were to end something of a famine, we'd be asking this after the first win. We'd be saying he's done it now. Should he walk away? That's the kind of logic.
It's the nature of the thing.
Yeah,
absolutely. So
anything subsequent, he's going to be thinking, well, I've done it now. The culture has changed. He knows what's in the dressing room. He knows the culture that's there. He's probably, I would assume, pretty happy that there's a succession plan in place.
Exactly. And, when you talk about there the effort, and you mentioned the Jimmy Keaveney story. I mean, we have to remember that Heffernan created a culture from the bottom up, from the ground up. There was nothing. It was ground zero. He comes in, everything goes up, not just a notch. It's completely transformed. Like, they have meetings. I mean, we talk, you think now about modern preparation, how teams communicate with each other, and there's, meetings and
they've got the shed.
They have the shed, and the shed is like their truth-telling space, and it's ruthless, and it's brutal, and it's unforgiving.
Tell me, because there will be listeners who aren't this familiar with the Dub. What is the shed?
The shed is literally, it's a tin hut, I think, wasn't it, in Parnell Park, where this great Dublin team would be gathered to just talk about the game and how they're going to approach games. Everything comes out, and Heffernan obviously presides over all of this and shapes the conversations, the tone, their thinking, what's expected of them. This is the foundation block of everything that is built, is this sense of giving everything of yourself, not just on the field, but off the field as well. It's your body, it's your mind, it's your soul. You're giving your soul to Dublin football, because that's what's required to get them to the level that Heffernan believes they should be at.
Just to give one example that I'm aware of, some of the games obviously were shown live on television, semi-finals, finals, but most games at that time were not televised. They would be recorded with a single camera for use in a highlights program. He used to obtain copies, VHS copies, of the single camera coverage of the games. And not satisfied with that alone, he also engaged a videographer to video the games and video the half of the field where they were not playing, so that he could see movement off the ball in preparation. And this stuff was dealt with in the shed. So if you hadn't made the correct run on what we would now refer to as transition, so when you turn the ball over and you look to play and the player hasn't meant, you'd be crucified.
Yeah.
So that's the level of detail that was being employed by them. And in response to that, Kerry crank it up another gear and we begin the arms race.
Yeah, and football is transformed, and GA sport, Gaelic sport, is transformed for good. And we could spend all night, exploring that. It's fascinating, what Heffernan and Dublin created, it detonated Gaelic Games.
If Heffernan is the Alex Ferguson figure in this dressing room, within the culture that's being created, there is a Roy Keane figure too. And that figure is Tony Hanaho. So tell us, how did Keano become the manager of Manchester United?
I think it's just, having a sense of the, having a sense of the kind of person that Tony Hanaho is, and the way he's always carried himself as a former player and as a player when he was in action. To compare him to Roy Keane just seems right and wrong all at the same time.
Well, I'll give you the right reasons. Okay, the right reasons are he's selfless to the cause. He will never make the wrong decision. He's the one guy on that Dublin team that you can always rely upon. And his teammates have said this in numerous publications since, that he is the guy that when the correct thing needs to be done, he does the correct thing.
He will do it, yeah.
And that's particularly important when we get down the tracks in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, temperamentally, he's a different character entirely. But he's a fascinating character. So tell us about the formative years of Tony Hanaho and how that makes him the perfect choice to succeed Kevin Heffernan in 1976.
So he grew up in Clontarf, relatively near to Croke Park. It gave him access to the place whenever he wanted to go. And he was surrounded by sport, but I suppose through school, in Sculvura, in Marino, and later Joey's and Fairview, that great academy of footballers. Gaelic Games, hurling and football become his thing. He goes to games at Croke Park as a child, 2 hours before he turns up just to get in the gate. And he often meets a young fella in a gabardine coat as he always described him, young James Keaveney. And they're both in there and they find ways to get to the best spots inside before the crowds come in and all that. Loved boxing. Ali was in Time to Come was his hero. Loved horse racing as time went on. Loved bullfighting. He at one point in his younger years, he kind of harbored a dream to be a bullfighter. He went to Barcelona, saved money to go to Barcelona to watch the bullfighters. And when if
that
you
would
really
have been
want
a terrific loss to Gaelic football.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, he's just one of these people that it seems if he had played rugby, for example,
which is entirely plausible given where he lived.
Utterly plausible. He almost certainly would have played for Ireland and probably the Lions. He's just a born leader. Ulick O'Connor, on the morning of the 1977 All-Ireland football final, Ulick O'Connor, the great journalist and author, interviewed him for the Sunday Independent and likened him to Bobby Kennedy in terms of the people he had met who just had this natural charisma as a leader of people. Someone who, again, as you say, had the right values, had the right mindset to get a job done, knew how to bring people with him, and knew the right thing to do at the right time. Always a solicitor by trade, very refined, extremely intelligent. I came across a wonderful line about education. There's a line in the census form about when did your education cease? And Hanaho says, death. Every day, every moment is a learning day.
He followed that line with one that I love, which I must mention. All the factors which you face in sport occur throughout life. I would look askance at those who see futility in the pursuit of a leather bag of wind.
Magnificent.
Tony Hanaho is my man.
Oh, I love. I mean, and thankfully he's still with us, and you will come across interviews. People might hear that quote and go, "He never said that." He absolutely did.
He did.
That is precisely in the exact considered, intelligent, fluid tone and language that he uses, and we will come across this repeatedly in this story. But in 1976, in the same way that Heffel was being possibly touted in the media as stepping away, Tony Hanaho by now was centre forward on the Dublin team, captain, incredibly selfless player. As I said, he's there since 64 with a significant gap, all right, of 5 years, and then dropped in 73. When Heffernan brings him back, he becomes, I suppose, for want of a better expression, a decoy centre forward. He has no problem at all in sacrificing himself to pull a way out from the centre to the wings, to create space for the likes of Bernard Brogan and Brian Mullins, storming through the middle and become a creator.
And Bobby Doyle.
As much as a Bobby Doyle coming out and coming around. He is utterly subservient to the team. And it is within that humility and subservience that his greatness is formed, because he makes that team tick. As you say, Ciaran, they all say it. If you want someone to make a right decision, it's Hanaho. Hanaho will make the right decision every time. But by 76, he's 31 years of age. And in the same way that they're talking about Heffel retiring, they're saying, will Hanaho stay on now? What's he going to do? And there's even, light conversations about, well, if Heffel stepped away in time, Tony Hanaho is the very obvious successor. But whatever about what the media are saying and those conversations about Heffernan stepping away, it seems that within the bubble of the Dublin panel, there is no notion or no idea that Heffernan could possibly even consider this. Now, you mentioned our episode on the Wembley tournament. Like, in that period, Dublin played Kerry 3 times in the space of, what was it, six weeks or something? All-Ireland final, the Wembley tournament, and then a league game in Tralee. And it's in this little window of time that Heffo steps away and suddenly Tony Hanaho becomes player manager. So to give just a timeline, it's a few weeks after the All-Ireland. The league has resumed, as you say. Their first league game is in Cork. They go to Cork, they win quite nicely. There's no anything. The celebrations are ongoing. There's a few league games before Christmas. The week before they go to Wembley, which is the weekend after the Cork game, they have a reception in Trinity College where Heffo is there, Tony Hanaho is there as an alumnus, Tommy Drum is there, Robbie Kelleher, Bernard Brogan. Again, there's no conversation about the idea of Heffernan leaving or anything like that. The only person who seems to have an inkling at all that he's thinking this way is Jimmy Gray, the Dublin County chairman, who you rightly say is the guy behind the scenes that makes all of this possible in terms of Heifer coming back and creating this empire. So they go to Wembley. They play a pretty awful game, as our Cards members will recall.
They had a long night in Cricklewood.
A long night in Cricklewood. Paddy Cullen came home with a broken finger, but also
not
had
quite as long a night as the Kerry lads had in Cricklewood. So that just seems to have been the save, and that appear to have been the determining factors of the result.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So they come back. They're back on the Monday, and on the Tuesday night, there's a meeting called in the Gresham Hotel for all the players and Heffernan. And the players turn up thinking he's probably just sorting out training or whatever it's going to be, or whatever we're going to be doing for the league. So they gathers them all in the room, and Heffernan tells them, I'm leaving. And the descriptions, and there are many, it's like one incredible melodrama. It's almost like an opera, for want of a better expression. You have Paddy Cullen kind of just standing up. He just stands up, because that's what his body tells him to do in this moment. They're so shocked. There's cries of, oh no, no, no. Their players are reduced to tears. David Hickey, famously remembered by others in some kind of a white suit, says, you're just going. Is that it?
David Hickey impersonating the man from Del Monte.
Well, they always, like something out of The Great Gatsby, And of course, some of those Dublin players would describe it in those terms, straight out of the great American novel, and it's just a moment of, they're they're going, what, obviously thinking, what the hell, what happens now? If they hadn't a sense and inkling that this was going to happen, the county board had offered Heffernan a 1-year extension that he had declined. I think you're right. When you go through what's said afterwards, it sounds like burnout. So the news leaks out of the players' meeting very quickly. Following day, it's in the Evening Herald. Jimmy Gray says that's premature and embarrassing to see that out there. But on the same day, Heffernan does a lunchtime interview on radio to confirm his decision. It's described in the papers as an open secret that Heffernan was thinking of stepping away, whether that's the case or not. Paddy Cullen, the goalkeeper, says, it's impossible to accept that Kevin has decided to stand down. There'll never be anyone like him again. Jimmy Keaveney is just talking about the game being poor for his loss and being such a great tactical thinker. Hickey, of course, is another fantastic man, a fantastic member of that team. Many, many years later, always felt bad about it. And himself and Heffernan had it out about it and went, okay, fair, that's David's view. He said, I think he left for the theatrical value of it. He just left us there. I think it was a betrayal of Larkin and Donald and the boys, the selectors and the team.
Which, by the way, and we should emphasise this, Kevin and Heffernan, to his dying day, would often deflect attention from himself and onto Donald Culfer and Larkin, because he didn't want it to be seen that it was all his doing.
Absolutely. And in this moment now, he has to explain himself in some way, shape or form why I did this. So at the end of the week in the Irish Independent, there's the headline, Why I Quit. And what Heffernan says is probably the truth. The rigidity of the training schedule, he says, was a bit too much for me. The morale of the team has never been better, and the team is in better shape to take a change. His wife talks about it, Mary Heffernan. She says, I've become so involved that I now feel something great is going out of my life. I knew, of course, that Kevin felt drained mentally and physically after the All-Ireland. He knew Dublin could win, and he put so much time and effort into helping them achieve their goal that this was only natural. I felt and hoped that he would take a rest for a while and then return to his job. Heffernan spoke again many years later, about 76, in this period, saying he was afraid of staleness. They've been on the go a few years. Maybe they needed a new voice. There were issues in his own working life. Very soon after this, he's appointed to chair an employment action team to try and again, keep in mind, whatever about being the head of industrial relations for ESB in the middle of a time of economic crisis. Now he's been tasked now with creating jobs in time of an economic crisis. So there is a lot going on. There really is, and I think it is that simple that he just got burned out.
And if he's a manager who knows his dressing room well, he will know when they need a new voice.
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
And this is where it gets a bit complicated for the Dublin County Board, because there has always been suggestions that Heffernan had in some way maneuvered Tony Hanaho into the job, or created a situation where Hanaho was going to be the natural successor. And of course, the Dublin County Board, whether that's true or not, the Dublin County Board don't want that to be seen to be the way things are done. Dublin County Board picked the manager, not Tony Hanaho or Kevin Heffernan or anybody else. So there's a bit of tension around now who's going to take over. But already, the articles that are talking about who's going to take over, there's a picture of Tony Hanaho with all of them. By the Thursday that week, the Dublin County Board have met. Hanaho is already being talked about as a replacement. No one really thinks that the player-manager gig is a good fit. Keep in mind that John Giles at the time had managed the Republic of Ireland football team and been a player at the same time, and that it was considered a failure at the time. There was also a league game against Kerry coming up, so they didn't have anybody to go there. So what happens in the end is Donald Colfer and Lorcan Redmond take the team to Kerry, and to be honest, the whole thing is an expression of where the Dubs feared this might go. So they go down to Tralee, Kerry win, the Dub fans are causing trouble on the terraces in Tralee. They vandalise some train carriage on the way back up to Dublin. There's a feeling of anarchy about the whole thing, about a loss of control. You know, there's a fear that this whole thing, this whole edifice could come crumbling down if the right move isn't made now. And within the time frame, so you're only talking a week or two between that Kerry game and their next league game against Kildare, Tony Hanaho is quietly and discreetly confirmed as the player manager. So it's his gig now.
And I presume with the same selectors, and it's just, this is continuity now, we carry on.
Exactly. Same selectors, same everything. Kildare is the first league game. He goes out, scores a goal. He wins an All-Star the week after that league game. He's the All-Star winning captain, player manager of Dublin, and to give you an idea of the kind of attention that was focused on Hanaho and Dublin at the time. And keep in mind, this is new now. I don't think any other team or individual up to this point would have experienced this kind of intense scrutiny. Perhaps Christy Ring, players like it. Maybe there are other players back the years that would have, but this is different. I mean, by the end of the year, in early December, there's talk of Hanaho as a Fianna Fáil candidate for the 1977 election. And there's also talk of him as a Fine Gael candidate. So that's all going around. He was on a committee with Gay Byrne to raise an enormous amount of money for the dependents of people who were lost in fishing disasters. Like the Dublin Supporters Club have a meeting near Christmas, and they're saying, having watched a couple of league games that have gone on, Hanaho needs to concentrate on managing and not playing anymore. There's talk in the papers of his Kerry girlfriend. You know, he gives an address at an ecumenical gathering of sports people. It's just this, it's just this wild world when you look back now of topics and ideas and events and queries and questions. And he's 31 years of age and he's a solicitor doing a job and he's organizing training and he's trying to hold this group together and maintain the culture that Heffernan has set and do it all in a way.
But is any of this unusual if you are the All-Ireland winning captain? Never mind the fact that he's now the player manager. You are going to be asked to attend certain things towards the end of a year. You're going to be asked, would you lend your support to a charity? Like, none of this to me seems unusual. What's unusual is that he has taken upon himself so much added responsibility. So
yeah,
let's get them post-Christmas, because let's face it, in the old days, you didn't kill yourself prior to Christmas, particularly if you'd been at the latter stages of the championship. So when it really matters, when the rubber hits the road and we've passed into a new year, 1977, what does he do to keep them on the way to success?
Well, he does pretty much what you suggested there earlier. He just keeps it between the ditches the same way that roughly the same way that Heffernan would have run it. Now, he's a different personality. He's more, I suppose, I wouldn't say he's softer, but he's more approachable, I suppose. I mean, he makes a point of going around after big games. He makes a point of going around to each player and congratulating them and saying, well done on their effort and so on in games. That kind of thing. I mean, he was he was quite reluctant, I suppose. When you look back now at things he said, I mean, in 2008, he did a Laker Gael for TG Carr. And in that Laker Gael, he said, the team were behind my nomination to take over as manager. I didn't have much time. It was a closely knit group, and the introduction of an outsider wouldn't have worked. It had to be an insider. It could have been a poison chalice. It could have been an opportunity. I didn't get any time to think about it. I just took it. I said yes. I was okay to do it. Did it put any pressure on me? The answer is yes. It put extreme pressure on me. So that's where he is in the spring of 1977. They don't ratchet up the training, I suppose, in the way that we might think about it until after Patrick's Day. They go to the 3 nights a week in the game, then at the weekend and so on. There was pressure on him as well to hold his position. As I said, there was talk of retirement, certainly outside of the circle at the end of 76. He's been marked by Kevin Moran in training. So if you can do it against Kevin Moran, I guess he's thinking it's okay. There's questions about who makes the call on the line if Hanaho isn't playing well. Who decides to take him off? You know, where does the line draw? Is the line drawn? He developed a series of signals with Colfer and Redmond from the fields to kind of, I suppose, in relation to switches and substitutions and so on. You know, everything essentially, there are no changes. And you know, that causes some frustration. Because if you say after 75, I mentioned when Kerry came through, Heffernan was ruthless. Like, he dropped the entire half back line from 75. Gone. And one of those guys was a guy called Paddy Riley. And by 77, Paddy Riley is still on the squad. And Heffer was gone, but he's still not getting really a look in. And this all culminates in an altercation with Bobby Doyle in Mars at Ballybock over team selections. Now, in fairness, both of them have explained it very well over the years. It was just one of those things, was a frustration thing. Bobby Doyle is saying, well, if you want to get in, who would you drop? And people get frustrated. It's understandable, but it's just an illustration sort of how it was. Now, Hanaho and the management did drop 5 players before the championship, including a couple of, I suppose, would you call them made men? You know, Leslie Deegan was going playing with the Hurlers. Georgie Wilson had been on the teams previously. They were let go. So, you know, it's like that. But so spring is fine. They get to a league final, which is good. They play Kerry. They lose. Hanaho's not too pushed. He says, look,
we're not going to lose the third one.
Exactly, the one that counts, right? But it's, again, in terms of just trying to describe Ciaran, the kind of the mood, I suppose, and the pressure that's just there, just this kind of constant attention that's there. Before that league final, there was a protest. A couple of protesters got onto the field in Croke Park protesting about IRA hunger strikers in Portlaoise prison and pleading for mercy for these guys, you know? And in the course of them coming on the field, David Hickey and John McCarthy from Dublin, they tackled the protesters and got them off the pitch. Now, that might sound like, well, it's kind of an amusing thing to happen, but this caused absolute uproar because the Dubs were going to America very soon afterwards to play a series of games. The All-Stars were going over there as well. And the word from America was John McCarthy and David Hickey shouldn't travel. John Kerry O'Donnell, our old friend from New York GA, back in episode 1 at the Polo Grounds, said these guys shouldn't travel. The heads of the North American board actually, you know, unofficially, I suppose, banned them. It wasn't exactly a ban they could enforce.
Can I just ask,
banned them.
Is the All-Stars being organised once again by
the
United
Fathers
Societies in San Francisco and the Kiltegan Fathers? Because I know some people that would have been involved the previous year who might object to this.
Yeah, it's starting to sound like it was, isn't it? As I said, it was David Hickey and John McCarthy who were kind of in the glare of this. Hickey travelled. John McCarthy was never going to travel by all accounts, but Hanaho somehow got pulled into this, and there was a threat made. So the Gardaí, again reportedly, had kept an eye on his house for some spell before they went to the States. But they went, and the whole thing passed off fine, and that was all well and good. So now we move into the 77 championship. They win the first game against Wexford. Really odd game. Seamus Aldridge is the referee, worth keeping in mind for a little later on. 2 sent off, 8 bookings. They beat Wexford 3-11 to 6 points. They improved nicely through the Leinster Championship. beat Meath in the Leinster final, which sets up an All-Ireland semi-final and the culmination
For the
of the
ages.
trilogy. Absolutely, and the culmination of the trilogy against Kerry. And again, this is a game, Ciaran, that we're not going to go into huge detail here because, again, this is a question for another day, whether the 1977 All-Ireland football semi-final truly was the greatest game of all time. Kerry are really up for this. Really, really up for this. And they're talking a big game. The Dubs are keeping it very low-key. It's actually interesting. The parallels between now, recent Dubs, and then are very interesting because when they won the 74 All-Ireland, they came back last in 75. There was a sense that they were almost too flamboyant. I suppose they were so shocked. They didn't know how to react to the whole thing. So they were very expressive and very excited about winning on All-Ireland. But after 75, they really, in 1970s terms anyway, they really kind of kept it on the down low, dampened the hype down. The hype wasn't dampened. We look back and we go, my God, it was a hype machine. To them, they were dampening it down, So it's not comparable, but I suppose the intention was the same, to keep it really low key. And Hanaho is often described as keeping his cards very close to his chest. For example, on the week of this game, on the week of the All-Ireland semi-final, he doesn't name a team on the Tuesday night, which is unusual for the era. But there is also something else that is interesting to note, Ciaran, at this point.
Go on.
So, Hefo, as we say, is not the manager anymore. But do you think...
He's had a bit of a break, though.
He's had a bit of a break. And do you think, knowing that his club is St. Vincent's, Hanaho is St. Vincent's, Brian Mullins is St. Vincent, Bobby Doyle is St. Vincent's, so many, Jimmy Keaveney is St. Vincent's, so many of this, era-defining team is formed from Vincent's. Do you think that Hefo was happy enough to just let the boys at it?
He lives very near Parnell Park.
He really does. And it's not a closed site. So Heffernan is seen that Tuesday night before the game in Parnell Park watching them train. I'm just going to leave that there, right?
I don't think that's all that unusual either, though.
It's not unusual. It's not unusual. And maybe
you live in the area. You're curious to see how the lads are getting on. You think you might go up and wish them well. It's hardly grounds for conspiracy.
It's not yet. And to be fair, like there's no question that Hanaho, Colfer, and Redmond are running the show. But I'm just saying he was there. He was around. Okay, they get to the game. Hanaho is thinking of his heroes, of Ali. He's thinking boxing. He is transported to Zaire and the Rumble in the Jungle in his mind, to Ali and George Foreman. And these two behemoths standing opposite each other just before the first bell. And Ali looks at Foreman and he says, "It's just you and me now, George." And that is how Hanaho frames for himself Dublin and Kerry. This is it. This is the war to end all wars. It's the trilogy. It's the decider. And he transplants that to he transmits that to the players. That is the energy he is bringing in to the hut, into the meeting rooms. He tells them, don't mind anyone who claims that we're finished. We're only starting. Because this is, compared to Kerry, this is an old team. They're getting on now. Whereas Kerry are just coming. But
Kerry
this
were
is
the young pups
now.
that came 2 years before, yeah.
Exactly. So the game goes on. And as I said, we will get into this game at another time. When it gets to half-time, Hanaho does all the talking, but the energy is enormous. Any silence is filled by the players just shouting, hooping, hollering, encouraging each other. But as you said, Ciaran, and maybe you can take this one because you did mention it earlier, about how Hanaho's greatness as a player and his ability to make the right decision at all times ultimately helps to decide this epic.
You can take this down to 2 critical goals in the second half. And the simplest thing I can say is just go on YouTube, find the highlights, and watch Tony Hanaho's role in both. And for efficiency of thought and execution, it's rare to see somebody do something so right so quickly when it was needed. Because if that ball doesn't fall into his hands, and the others have acknowledged this, at the times it does, and isn't moved in the manner he moves it, they're not goals.
No. And he creates the 2 goals that decide the game in the end. They're enormous moments, not just in that game, but in the history of Gaelic football. Enormous moments, but he does it. In the moment he had to do it, he did it. So the Dubs win, and it's just, I mean, if the place was buzzing before, it's now just blue heaven. It's
pandemonium. And the other
Yeah.
thing is, we have to consider who they're going to play in the 77 final now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in an era when, as you said earlier on, people come to accept that the Dubs and Kerry are so far ahead of everyone else. It doesn't matter that this is a team on something of a mission themselves they're facing, who are trying to win their first All-Ireland.
Yeah, Armagh. It is, and this is the great challenge that Hanaho sees. Again, almost immediately, the final whistle is blown, it seems.
How do you avoid complacency in a circumstance where you are going to go in runaway favourites?
He recognises this straight away. And he first of all, tries to come to a solution himself about how I will approach this. It's actually quite methodical despite the emotion of the whole thing. So we go back to the dressing room. The Dublin dressing room is wild. The players are singing, "We've got the whole world in our hands," you know. We got the whole... It's so Dub, you know. In our hands, you know. We're all going, boys. We're going to do it. You know, Hanaho is there in the middle of them all. And he admits it's impossible, he says, to improve on that result. All I can say is I'm proud of everyone. It took guts and spirit to keep going as effectively as it did. Heffernan is in the dressing room. To be fair,
again,
you know,
he's just come down to congratulate the lads. I'm not seeing anything untoward.
It's him and 200 other Dubs. And there's talk of overconfidence. Of course, reporters say, "What about overconfidence, Kevin? What do you think?" And he says they're too experienced to let that happen. And already Hanaho's mind is turning. I mentioned there about the hype and things. It's the one thing he's often said over the years, that the hype and the attention was the one thing that he didn't sit comfortably with him. So when this game was over, he's almost forced out of the dressing room once he can get away. And he disappears to Garristown up in North County Dublin and goes to a pub and has a pint. And he meets Paddy Wilson, an old Dublin teammate. A couple of drinks. And by the time he comes back into town to the celebrations, he has the strategy.
Love GEA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
And he has described the strategy for the final as thus. He said, "I'd spend the next 4 weeks hammering the players psychologically and physically into shape about the challenge they could expect in the final. It's only one game away from a title. One team loses, one team wins. I was very worried they mightn't have the 110% concentration that's needed." He, at this point, and he has said it since himself, when he hits the field for the All-Ireland final, is physically and psychologically spent. Absolutely exhausted. This is the first all-ticket final, Ciaran, for an All-Ireland.
All right.
And while that sounds like an interesting development,
it's not if you're having to divvy out tickets.
Hanaho describes it for the players as an appalling distraction. Because instead of people just turning up on the day and paying in, now the players are getting calls going, "Well, can you give me tickets, or where do I get a ticket?" And it's just all on them. And you have, of course, everybody saying you're gonna walk this, or you're gonna win it comfortably. So he's battling that. So he is exhausted by the time he gets on the field. Now, as it turns out, Jimmy Keaveney has the day of days, scores 2-7, and Dublin win well. And it's for the achievement that it is for Hanaho, it's actually quite an underwhelming final and an underwhelming kind of reaction, because he's also the first Dublin captain to receive the Sam Maguire Cup twice, in 1976 and 1977. He's the manager who has brought this thing to fruition. You asked earlier, did anything change? The 1977 All-Ireland final team was exactly the same as the 1976 All-Ireland final team. So he has made that decision as well. And people might go, "Oh, sure, wasn't it handy enough and easy enough for him?" But as we've already described, he had to withstand a variety of pressures through the year. from people, from panelists, I'm sure, who thought, no, the heifer was gone, I got a chance here. But they just couldn't get in. There is criticism of Hanaho's performance in the final. He doesn't actually win. Like, Dublin win 8 All-Stars. He doesn't win an All-Star. But in the totality of what was achieved in that year, and a lot of the players would have said afterwards, because they were angry at Heffernan, some of them, for walking away, some of them felt like they had been betrayed. Some of them felt that Heffernan had almost gotten too much credit for what Dublin had achieved to that point. And I'm not sure, I mean, that's one to argue. But they felt that winning the All-Ireland without Heffernan, as a playing group with Hanaho in charge, was the greatest statement of all. That this was the one that really proved the mettle of who they were.
Okay, Mick, I'm going to stop you there.
Thank you.
We've had this occur once before when we were recording a Carja exclusive on the Compromise Rules series of 1984.
Yeah.
Where midway through, we realised that we were actually sitting upon a mini-series.
We're very good planners, aren't we? Things just occur to us as they just now happen.
There's nothing like natural order. And it would strike me that at this point in the story, with Tony Hanaho as Atlas, lifting the world in his hands, well, maybe his team were of that opinion, but that is the point for us to take a little bit of a break now and maybe come back next week with a part 2 in this story, because it would be some achievement were he to do this for a year, but he does carry on. So let's tell the second part of that story next week. And in the meantime, listeners, you can always like, share and subscribe and let everybody know about part 1.
Yeah.